Embase ya Uganda mu ggwanga Democratic Republic of Congo Ekumidwako Omuliro ne Embase ya Rwanda ne Embase ya France ne Embase z'amawanga amalala nnyingi zikumiddwako omuliro ng'Abakongo beekalakaasa mu kibuga Kinshasa n'ebibuga ebirala nga bagamba nti kisusse oba omulamuzi gano amawanga ge gali mu kuwagira Rwanda ne M23 okukuba eggwanga lyabwe. Bagamba nti nno General Museveni ne gavumenti ya Uganda bali mu mabega wa M23 wamu ne Paulo Kagame akulembera eggwanga lya Rwanda ko n'amawanga g'abajungute nga babba minerals zaabwe nga babba ebyobugagga bya Congo era nga ekiriwo kiraga nti ekibuga Goma ekya Eastern Congo kyandibanga kiwambiddwa abayekera ba M23 era nga bakiri mu mitambo ate nga yewasinga ebyobugagga eby'omu ttaka kati nekitabudde Abakongo ne bagamba kati amawuje n'amawanga amagwira mu nsi yaabwe gakolamu ki nga tegasobola kubayambako kulemesa bayekera abo kwegazanyizibwa kwegisanga ekiketentula mu nsi yaabwe kati nabo kabasalewo bagagobe kubanga tebalina mugaso. Kale atandikewo tutya ebigambo.
Foreign embassies have been attacked in the capital of the Democratic Republic of the Congo as protests erupt over the rebels' deadly insurgency in the eastern city of Goma. Demonstrators in Kinshasa targeted the embassies of France, the United States, Uganda and Kenya. They're accusing the countries of being complicit in Rwanda's support of M23 rebels. Rwanda has denied supporting the group. Police have been deployed across the capital to try to disperse tens of thousands of protesters who lament the response of the international community to the violence being seen in Goma. Demonstrators are supporting the DRC's Prime Minister and have vowed to fight for their country.
We've had enough. Too much is too much. Even Uganda is complicit. Tshisekedi, you told us that if just one bullet was fired in Goma, we would attack Rwanda. The Congolese people stand behind you, Mr. President. We will fight Rwanda.
We are ready to fight, to get the enemy out. For our sovereignty, for our country. Pick up weapons and fight for Felix. We can't do any more dialogue in this country. We are proud to stand up and fight the enemy.
Fierce fighting is continuing in Goma. Rebels have captured the city's airport as they near total capture of Goma since entering days ago. The UN says bodies are lining the streets and hundreds of people have been injured. 4 South Africans have been killed by mortars, bringing the total number of deaths of peacekeepers to 17. A Tanzanian truck driver delivering food supplies to the region says he saw terrible things.
We saw and heard terrible things, dead bodies, gunshots, bombs, things we have never experienced in our country. We thank God we have made it out. We haven't had anything to eat since the war erupted 3 days ago. We could not cook because we had taken cover under the trucks. Bullets and bombs were landing just next to us the whole time.
The violence in Goma threatens to exacerbate an already dire humanitarian situation in the region. Hundreds of thousands of civilians have been displaced. The UN says the risk of a health crisis is rising.
We have reports of rapes committed by fighters, looting of property, including of a humanitarian warehouse, and humanitarian and health facilities being hit. Hospitals in Goma are reportedly overwhelmed, struggling to manage the influx of wounded people. Electricity and water supplies are compromised, and yesterday internet services were cut off and Goma is still offline.
Congo gigava mu Democratic Republic of Congo bigambo birungi si birungi eri bannafaabo ate nga bakakasa bo bagamba nti Uganda ne Rwanda bali mabega wa M23 nabawagira abayekera bano bibabawa ebyokulwanyisa babawa emmere babawa uniform babawa mafuta babawa buli kimu okubanga batulugunya eggwanga lya Congo kutuusa ku kiriko kati nabagamba basukidde mu gatego gweshatu bagenda kudda mabega paka nga bagobye omulabe mu nsi yaabwe era nga kati batadde akazito ku president waabwe Kisekedi bagamba nti watusuubiza nti singa M23 ne kubbe essasi limu mu kibuga Goma ogenda kulumba Rwanda ogisesebule nti kati olinda ki abasajja bayingidde Goma tulumbe Rwanda tugikakaggule kubanga yebali emabega katufe tulumba oli mukama waabwe ne bano babule abasupplyinga n'ebyokulwanyisa tujja kuba tumenya mu jjenje kkalu tubifune.
Heavy gunfire echoed the streets of eastern Congo's biggest city on Tuesday. Rwandan-backed rebels entered Goma the day before, a dramatic escalation of a 3-decade conflict that has also triggered protests in the capital Kinshasa. But the rebels, led by the M23 militia, are facing pockets of resistance from the army and its backers. This social media video has been verified using previous footage of the area and satellite imagery, though the identities or affiliations of the troops were not confirmed. The violence has left, the United Nations said, many dead bodies scattered in the streets.
The humanitarian situation in and around Goma remains extremely worrying.
Jens Lerck, spokesperson for the UN's humanitarian office, said hospitals were overwhelmed.
We have reports of rapes committed by fighters, looting of property, including of a humanitarian warehouse, and humanitarian and health facilities being hit.
This violence in eastern Congo is rooted in the Rwandan genocide and the control of natural resources. The UN and global powers fear an escalation into a regional war like those in 1996 to 1997 and 1998 to 2003. Conflicts that killed millions, mostly through hunger and disease. In the latest diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis, South Africa said its president Cyril Ramaphosa and his Rwandan counterpart Paul Kagame had agreed in a phone call on the need for a ceasefire. On Tuesday, the insecurity fueled anger in the Congolese capital over perceived foreign interference. Police clashed with protesters who attacked diplomatic buildings in Kinshasa, including a UN compound and the French and US embassies. This was the Rwandan embassy, its gates set ablaze. Rwanda has long denied backing M23, though UN experts have concluded that Kigali has provided significant manpower and firepower. The Congolese government and the head of UN peacekeeping have said Rwandan troops were present in Goma, backing up their M23 allies. Rwanda has said it was adopting a defensive posture because of the threat posed to it by Congolese militias.
Ekyo nno kyekiriwo gegali ekkongo ago ebigambo si birungi si birungi era nga wandirabanga olutalo namutayiika luzza ate ne lulumbirako ne Uganda era nga Congo yeegamba Uganda, Rwanda bye bali emabega wa M23 tayinza kukibajjako ate nga ne UN report nayo ekakasa lwatu misanagaka nti Rwanda ne Uganda bebawagira M23 bebabawa manpower training n'abasirikale kitegeeza abasirikale ba Uganda baliyo bambadde ebyambalo ebiragamba M23 so nga ba Uganda bebambala ebyambalo bya Rwanda ne bagamba mu ba M23 ripoti bwegamba ne mundu ne motoka byonna bibakozesa bya Uganda na Rwanda era reporta ya UN bwetegeeza kati nno bo abakungu kibalemedde kubagamba nti kati nno wayino okubaawo ekikolebwa ku Rwanda ne Uganda kubanga bafuusa akayinja mu ngato ate jjukiranga ne president yavaako oli yali mu butu seseseko yalina kyemalira naye era General Museveni yamulumba namukuba namujjako akati naye akayagala kudda mu kuba ku luno oba baagala kugiwamba kugifuula part of Rwanda naye beere Rwanda Republic simanyi naye nga kyekyo kiriwo e Congo kubanga bakakasiza ddala nti nno gana amagye ga M23 gayina ebyokulwanyisa namuzisa nga tayanza bajasi bwezi kabinja kabayeekera wabula waliwo amawanga bagagawagira era nga
The South African National Defence Force has confirmed that 13 South African soldiers have died in the eastern DRC. The situation remains volatile and unpredictable, with the SANDF saying it remains committed to its peacekeeping responsibilities. Meanwhile, President Cyril Ramaphosa held a telephonic call with President Paul Kagame of Rwanda to discuss the recent developments and the escalation in the fighting that's underway. The two heads of state have agreed on the urgent need for a ceasefire and the resumption of peace talks by all parties to the conflict. Now, to discuss this even further, we're joined by the Institute for Security Studies consultant, Peter Fabriscus. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, we're learning with the 4 more members of the SANDF being killed. As we try and make sense of the situation on the ground, what does it tell us about the tensions on the ground as the M23 overruns Goma?
Yeah, well, I mean, the M23, as we know, is thoroughly backed militarily and otherwise by Rwanda. It's a very powerful force as a result, with some very sophisticated weaponry such as surface-to-air missiles and so on. And it's, I mean, Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, has various strategic objectives, I believe, in ensuring that the M23 makes its presence felt in the DRC. You know, captured Goma, which is a very powerful statement. It becomes a kind of bargaining chip in negotiations. And makes it very difficult to dislodge Rwanda from the eastern DRC.
As you say that, I mean, we know that a very disturbing video was circulating on social media showing an SANDF soldier raising a white flag at the base. And the SANDF has since reacted, saying that the video is showing its troops raising that flag was them seeking a truce and not a surrender. What's your take on that reaction?
Yeah, I'm inclined to believe that it's you know, one doesn't know. We're a long way from the battlefield, and the fog of war is very thick and dense. But yeah, the fact that they don't seem to have surrendered, they do still seem to be in the base, as far as we know. And also, this is not only from the SANDF, but from other, you know, like members of officials of the National Defence Union. That would tend to corroborate the view that it wasn't a surrender. It was a temporary truce negotiation, which didn't succeed.
Yeah. It hasn't succeeded, and you know, as you and I speak, some families are perhaps looking to hear more information about their loved ones who are involved in that you know, battle, that intense fighting. As you assess what's happening there on the ground, I mean, from a security point of view, what are your findings?
Well, I mean, it's the whole region of the eastern DRC has been terribly unstable for decades, really, one would have to say. And this is just intensifying that. You know, I mean, it's a sort of battleground for countless numbers of armed rebel groups. No, literally, people don't know how many. But none is quite as ruthless and efficient as the M23. I think largely because it is supported by Rwanda. You know, with weaponry, with training, with actual reinforcement with Rwandan soldiers who are physically present in the eastern DRC, and now they're running rampant. They've taken over several towns and now the city of Goma. So it's a highly unstable situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And as the reports continue to emerge of that intense fighting with South African soldiers in Goma, calls are being made for Defence Minister Angie Motshekga to do something, urgently address the situation. How should this matter be handled? Or you know, as you look and assess it, surely one would have thought that reinforcements would be sent. What are the plans that could be put in place to try and avert further loss of life?
Yeah. Well, as far as I was told by authoritative, you know, sources, on Sunday night, the South African National Defence Force was contemplating sending in reinforcements. But what then happened was that the M23 overtook Goma more rapidly than the SANDF had anticipated. And that cut off the possibility of air supply, either reinforcements or of equipment. And so they abandoned the notion of reinforcements. The option now is basically a ceasefire. That, as your introduction mentioned, Presidents Kagame and Ramaphosa discussed that as the best option. And there are several diplomatic initiatives underway. One right now, actually, there's a meeting of the SADC security organ Troika, meeting virtually, to discuss this. Tomorrow there's going to be a meeting of the East African Community, a summit, in which hopefully both Kagame and the DRC President Tshisekedi will be participating, because they're both members of the East African Community. It's a meeting called by Kenyan President William Ruto, and hopefully, they will agree on a ceasefire. Which will mean, amongst other things, apart from addressing the larger question, it will give an opportunity for our troops to be relieved, where they are now apparently trapped in their bases in Goma and Sake.
Just, you speak about troops being relieved. Relieved as in pack their bags and head back home. What sort of relief?
Yeah, well, that's the question. I mean, to be released, I guess, from their entrapment, if you want to put it like that.
Yeah.
But what that will mean in terms of their longer term presence, I think is a rather open question, because that may become a contentious issue in negotiations. It is possible that a ceasefire would enable those troops. I mean, for one thing, they need to send some of their wounded comrades out to be treated, apparently, because that was one of the terms that was being discussed in that truce negotiation. At the time the white flag was raised. So there are various possibilities. A ceasefire might simply be a kind of humanitarian gesture pending further negotiations about the substance. It's hard to say at this stage.
Should talks be unsuccessful, what would that mean for troops on the ground?
Yeah, look, as I said, if the idea is, as I gather, it is to have a ceasefire, and then to have more substantive talks, then maybe they will be relieved. They'll be able to treat their wounded. They'll be able to get supplies and food and drink and whatever, maybe ammunition. I don't know, and then then the substantive negotiations would start, and depending on those, their future situation would be determined. But it's my concern here is that it's possible that Kagame might say, "Oh, yeah, I'm prepared to let them all go, but only on condition that they leave the country, that they get out of it, because he's taken the view all along that the M23 is a Congolese problem, not a Rwandese problem, but they are Congolese citizens who are being persecuted because they're ethnic Tutsi, and so the Congo should sort that out. Congolese should sort it out amongst themselves, and not involve outsiders, and that the SADC force, including the South Africans, is basically a kind of foreign invasion force. It's not, it's not necessarily a view that I share, but it could be what shapes his take on the negotiations for a ceasefire.
Very well. Thank you so much. Thanks for weighing in on this developing story. Speaking there to the Institute for Security Studies consultant, Peter Fabricius, joining us there, expanding as we continue to watch the developments in the in the DRC, Eastern DRC.
Ndozawulidde blame yonna eteekebwa ku Uganda, eteekebwa ku Rwanda okubanga eri emabega w'abasajja bano. Era kyekinyiza Tshisekedi wadde batuuza Smile East African Community ne batuula ne babyogerako, ne Tshisekedi agamba abasajja muli mukundi amulukwe. Ekisooka wano waliwo obuzibu bunene. Ruto kati ali under onzo gamba ali twisted by General Museveni kati takyasobola kubako kyakola kyonna kiyamba Congo era inakola biyamba M23 eya General Museveni ne Kagame kubanga bwabanga akolera kati wansi wa General Museveni ate nga gwe bataddeko nga akulira peace talks azinza okubavaamu ekiramu eno mugenda mu peace talks eri Rwanda ne M23 ne Uganda balumba bwe mugenda mu peace talks ngeri balumba ate nga gwe muze gwa Museveni kuva mu nsiko yawa ne Uganda bagenda Nairobi okuteesa bavive batabasizinge fire nga ye eri asonga mbere kati labo bali mu kikololwa leero nze ngamba kyandibadde kigambo kimu Congo kona fire abasajja bocha kona tu paka ngo bavubutudde mu nsi yo nebo munadamu smart peace talks were just wasting time mugende ground abana mbawe mundu abana bekalakasa mbawe mubawo omuliro bagambe kati tulumbe tewali kuleka kiyimiridde mubateeke kinnakimu nga bateeze bwala ba musirikala bwala ba track just mugabo bocha bubawenga bo balina muleya tebalina mu uniform balyoke boke M23 naye bulweko obutuuliro nebo munadamu malala ago mujja kumaliza eggwanga lye bali tutte ba Republic of Bavandimwe kali mwera